This happened back in 2021, when I was desperate to find a new job. After weeks of applying to anything I could find online, I finally got an offer to work as a night security guard at a small office building on the edge of town. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was something. And honestly, I figured it would be an easy job. I pictured sitting behind a desk for a few hours, maybe walking the halls once or twice, and then going home. The guy who hired me, a man named Paul, said the shift would be from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. and that I'd mostly just be keeping an eye on the security cameras and making sure the building stayed locked up. Easy enough, right? That first night, I pulled up around 9:45. The building was a two-story structure, kind of old-looking, with big glass doors in the front and just one parking lot light that barely lit anything. It was surrounded by thick trees, so once you stepped out of your car, you were basically in darkness, except for the glow coming from the building. Inside, Paul gave me a quick rundown before leaving. He showed me the camera room, handed me a ring of keys, and told me to do a walkthrough of each floor once every hour. Then he left, and it was just me in this big, empty building. The first hour was fine. I sat at the desk, watched the cameras, scrolled on my phone a bit. At 11, I grabbed the flashlight he gave me and started my first round. The halls were dead silent. Just that low hum you hear in old buildings from the vents or whatever. When I got to the second floor, I noticed something that put me a little on edge. One of the office doors near the end of the hallway was open, just slightly. Paul had told me everything should stay locked, so I figured maybe he forgot to shut it. I pushed it open all the way, shined the flashlight inside, and saw nothing. Just a normal office. Desk, chairs, a couple filing cabinets. I closed the door and made sure it clicked shut this time. Back in the security room, I checked the camera feeds. Everything looked normal. Except I noticed that same office door on the second floor was open again. I stared at the monitor for a good 30 seconds, telling myself I must not have closed it properly. I grabbed the flashlight and went back upstairs. Sure enough, the door was open a few inches again. The weird part was, I know I heard it click before. I shut it again, locked it this time, and went back to the desk. The next hour crawled by. It was around 1 a.m. when I started feeling uneasy. The camera feed for the hallway with that office door had this weird flicker to it, like the signal was bad. Then, I swear, I saw something move across the screen. Not like a person walking, more like a shape. Really fast, almost like the shadow of someone running by. I leaned in closer, and the screen glitched for a second, then cleared up. The hallway looked empty again. I told myself I was just tired and imagining things, but then I heard it. A loud slam, like a door shutting hard somewhere upstairs. My stomach dropped because I knew which door it had to be. I grabbed the flashlight and the keys again, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The second floor felt different this time. Colder. The hum from the vents was gone, and it was dead. Quiet. I turned the corner toward that office, and sure enough, the door was wide open now. Not cracked, not halfway fully open. I stood there, my flashlight shaking in my hand, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. I stepped inside, just enough to shine the light around. Still empty. I was about to back out when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway behind me. I spun around and saw nothing. I started backing up toward the stairs when the lights in the hallway flickered and went out completely. For a second, the only light was from my flashlight, and in that split second, I swear I saw someone standing at the far end of the hall. Tall, completely still, just watching me. I didn't even think. I bolted down the stairs, ran straight out the front door, and didn't stop until I was in my car. I sat there with the engine running, staring at the building, half expecting to see something in the windows. Nothing happened. I didn't go back inside to grab my stuff. I just left. The next morning, I called Paul and told him I quit. He didn't even sound surprised. All he said was, "Yeah, I get it." That was my first and last night on the job. I was 26 and had just moved back to my hometown after years of working out of state. I didn't have much lined up when I got back, so I was taking whatever I could get. After about 2 weeks of searching, I landed a job as an overnight stock clerk at a small grocery store that stayed open 24 hours. It wasn't glamorous, but I figured it would be easy enough quiet nights. Just me and a couple other employees stocking shelves until morning. On my first shift, I showed up around 11:45 p.m. The manager, a guy named Rick, gave me a quick rundown of what to do. He was only there to close up the office before leaving for the night. So once he left, it would just be me and one cashier. The store was in a quiet area right off a 2-lane highway, surrounded by empty lots and a patch of woods behind the parking lot. Nothing else nearby but a closed gas station across the street. It honestly felt a little eerie even before the night started. The first couple of hours went by slow. I was restocking the dairy section while the cashier, some teenager named Max, stayed up front playing on his phone. There weren't many customers coming in, maybe one every 20 minutes, and they were all just grabbing snacks or cigarettes and leaving. It was around 2 a.m. when things started to feel different. I was in the back near the storage room when I heard the chime at the front door. Nothing unusual, but when I peeked down the aisle, I didn't see anyone. I walked out toward the front to see if Max was ringing someone up, but he was standing there alone, looking toward the entrance with this weird look on his face. I asked him what was up, and he said he saw someone come in, but they just walked off without saying anything. We both looked around, but the store was empty. The front doors were still locked open in that welcome position, so it wasn't like they'd left already. I brushed it off as maybe he was just seeing things. But when I went back to stocking, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. A few minutes later, I heard something metallic fall in one of the aisles, like a can or a shelf bracket. I walked over to check, and there was a single can of soup lying in the middle of the floor from an aisle I hadn't even started working on yet. I picked it up, looked around, nothing, just silence, and that low hum from the refrigerators. Not long after, the chime at the front door went off again. This time, both of us were sure we didn't see the doors move. It was like the sensor went off on its own. Max was starting to freak out a little. He kept asking if we had cameras, so I went into the office to check the monitors. That's when things got worse. On one of the feeds, I saw someone standing in the back corner of the store, near the storage room door, just standing there. Their head was tilted like they were staring at the ground, and their arms were hanging limp at their sides. At first, I thought maybe a late customer had wandered back there without us noticing. But when I looked up from the monitor and turned toward that exact aisle, there was no one there. I walked over with my flashlight, heart pounding, but the aisle was empty. I even checked the storage room, and the door was locked from the outside just like I left it. That was the point where I seriously considered calling the manager. But then something happened that made me forget about everything else. Max started yelling from the front. I ran out and saw him pointing toward the glass doors. There was a man standing outside. He was tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes. His face was obscured by the shadow of his hood, but he wasn't moving. He was just staring in at us through the glass. We both froze, trying to figure out what the hell he was doing there. Max went to grab the phone to call the police, and the second he did, The guy turned and walked out of view toward the side of the building. I told Max to lock the doors while I went to check the side entrance. The moment I stepped into that narrow side hallway, the emergency exit door handle started rattling violently. It sounded like whoever was outside was trying to force it open. I backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound, when the rattling suddenly stopped. The silence after that was worse than the noise. I ran back to the front, told Max to stay behind the counter, and we waited. Minutes went by. Then, out of nowhere, the store lights flickered just for a second, but long enough to make every aisle look like a scene from a horror movie. That's when I saw it. On the far end of an aisle, someone was standing there again. Same tilted head, same posture. Before I could even move, the lights flickered a second time, and they were gone. That was it for me. I told Max we were leaving and locked the doors on our way out. We sat in my car until the sun came up, and neither of us saw anything else. The manager didn't believe a word of it when I told him the next day, and he even laughed when I said I quit. But I don't care. Whatever was in that store that night, it wasn't just some random guy. My name's Eric, and this happened last year when I was 24. At the time, I had just gotten out of college and moved to a small town for what I thought would be a fresh start. I didn't know many people there and didn't have much money saved up, so I was desperate to find work quickly. After a couple weeks of job hunting, I saw an opening for a security guard position at a local warehouse. It wasn't some big company, more like a privately owned storage facility that handled shipments for small businesses. The ad mentioned overnight shifts, which I'd never done before. But the pay was decent, and I figured it couldn't be that hard. Just sitting around, keeping an eye on things, right? So, I applied, and got a call the same day from a man named Greg. He sounded professional, maybe a little rushed, but nothing about the call seemed off. He asked me a few basic questions and then said, "Can you start this Friday night?" "Of course," I said yes. It felt like a relief to finally have a job. I didn't think much more about it until Friday came. I showed up at the warehouse around 10:30 p.m. It was a big, isolated building sitting on the edge of town, surrounded by empty lots and a thin stretch of woods behind it. There were only 2 cars in the entire parking lot. Mine and an older model pickup truck, which I assumed belonged to Greg. The place looked even more deserted than I expected. Just a faint yellow glow from a few lights above the loading bays. When I walked inside, Greg was waiting near the main office. He was tall, maybe in his late 42nd, wearing a security uniform like mine, except his looked worn and faded. He had this stiff smile that never really felt genuine, but I tried not to read too much into it. He gave me a quick tour of the building, rows of storage racks stacked high with boxes, a few hallways leading to offices, and a break room in the back. The whole place felt too quiet. The kind of silence where you almost expect to hear something lurking in the background. Greg explained my job was simple. Stay in the control room, monitor the cameras, and do a walkthrough every hour. Easy enough. We went through the paperwork, and as he was checking over my forms, he started asking small talk questions. Where I lived, if I had a roommate, how far my drive was. Normal questions, I guess. But it felt like he was trying to figure out more than just my work availability. I answered vaguely, just to be safe. Once that was done, he said he'd stick around for a while to make sure I understood everything. I didn't think much of it. My first hour was spent in front of the monitors. Most of the cameras showed the warehouse aisles, but one screen displayed the back lot behind the building, the one that faced the woods. For the first half hour, everything was completely still. Then, a little after midnight, I noticed something weird. On the backlot camera, I saw what looked like a person standing at the tree line, It was too far to make out details. Just a tall shape barely visible in the grainy black and white feed. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds, thinking maybe it was a tree or a shadow, but then it moved. Just a slight shift, like someone leaning forward. I told Greg about it, and he walked over to look at the screen. For a second, he just stared silently. Then he said, "Probably a deer," and walked away like it was nothing. I wanted to believe that, but it didn't look anything like an animal. The next time I glanced at the monitor, the figure was gone. Around 1 a.m., Greg suggested we do my first walkthrough together. We started down one of the long aisles, our footsteps echoing in the emptiness. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us from behind the stacks of boxes. Every corner we turned felt tighter, like the air itself was heavier. Greg didn't say much during the walkthrough, just pointed out doors and exits, but every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me. After we finished, Greg said he was going to take his break outside for a smoke. He told me to stay in the control room and keep an eye on the cameras. That's when things really went downhill. 5 minutes after Greg stepped outside, I glanced at the backlot feed again. There were 2 figures now, one near the tree line, like before, and another closer standing just beyond the glow of the security light. Both of them were completely still. I froze, staring at the screen, hoping it was some kind of glitch. Then the second figure moved forward into the light, and I realized it was Greg. He wasn't smoking. He was just standing there, facing the other figure. Neither of them moved for what felt like forever. Then, suddenly, the camera feed cut to static. I didn't know what to do. I checked the hallway cameras to see if Greg was coming back in, but every monitor showed empty corridors. That's when I heard it, the heavy metal door at the back of the warehouse clanging shut. I shot up from the chair and grabbed my stuff, but when I opened the office door, I froze. The long hallway ahead was completely dark. I swear those lights were on earlier. I took a few cautious steps forward, and that's when I heard footsteps. Not Greg's. More than one set. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the hall from somewhere deeper in the building. I didn't wait to find out who or what it was. I ran for the nearest exit, sprinted across the lot, and didn't stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. I called the sheriff's department from the gas station down the road. They sent someone out. But apparently, Greg claimed he never left the building and there was no one else on the property. They checked the cameras, every feed was working, except the one facing the back lot. Convenient. I quit the next morning and packed up everything I owned within the week. Whatever was going on in that warehouse that night, I don't want to know. But the way Greg just stood there in the dark, facing that other figure, it still keeps me up at night. My name is Emily, and I haven't had a real night's sleep in over a week. Not because I can't sleep, but because I don't feel safe closing my eyes anymore. That's what happens when someone you thought you knew turns out to be capable of something out of a nightmare. I broke up with my boyfriend, Daniel, 3 weeks ago. It wasn't messy, at least not in the beginning. We'd been dating for almost a year. At first, he was sweet, attentive, funny. The kind of guy who made me feel like I finally got lucky. But over time, that attentiveness turned into something darker. He'd get upset if I didn't respond to his texts within minutes. He'd ask me weird questions like who I was smiling at that day or if any guys talked to me at the gym. He started showing up at places where I was hanging out with friends, uninvited, and somehow always knew where I was. He'd say things like, "I just wanted to make sure you were safe." But it felt like anything but that. The final straw came when he asked me to install a tracking app on my phone so we could trust each other. Not sharing locations, he wanted to track my phone 24/7. That was it for me. I ended things that night. He cried, then went completely silent. Something about that silence terrified me more than if he had yelled or begged. For a little while, things seemed fine. I blocked his number and tried to get back to normal, hitting the gym again, cooking for myself, just trying to feel like my life was mine again. But about a week later, the weird stuff started. I began getting random texts from numbers I didn't recognize. They weren't threatening, at least not at first, just vague messages like, "Miss you," or "Why won't you talk to me?" I blocked every number, thinking it was some spam bot or wrong number. But the messages kept coming, and they got stranger. One said, "You looked so pretty today. I hadn't left my apartment all day." That's when I started to feel truly uneasy. One night around 2 a.m., I woke up to a faint creaking sound, like a door opening. I froze. My bedroom door was closed. I knew that for sure because I'm obsessive about it. I told myself it was a dream and tried to go back to sleep. But my heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the silence. The next morning, everything in the apartment looked normal except for one thing. My hallway closet door was slightly open. I never leave it open. Ever. And the weird part? It opens outward. So even if I had left it cracked, it would have swung fully open on its own. I stared at it for a full minute before finally pulling it wide open. Nothing. Just coats and shoes. But something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining things. That night, I shoved a chair under my bedroom door handle and left my lamp on. I even slipped a kitchen knife under my pillow, just in case. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was waking up in total darkness. My lamp was off. My door was open. I thought maybe I had dreamed putting the chair there, but then my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I saw something at the foot of my bed. A shape. A black mass. I blinked hard, and that's when I realized what I was seeing. The top half of someone's head, crouching low. Before I could react, I felt hands on my feet. Gentle at first, then gripping. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed in my life. That's when I heard his voice. Daniel's voice. "Calm down, Em. It's just me." Before I could scream again, he was on top of me, pressing his hand over my mouth. I tried to fight, but he was stronger than me. He kept whispering that he wasn't there to hurt me, he just wanted to talk. He said he'd only let go if I promised not to scream. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. The first thing I asked was how he got in. He told me, completely calm, that he had made a copy of my apartment key when we were together. "Just in case of an emergency," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. He stayed in my room for almost half an hour, sitting there, talking like nothing was wrong. Like this was some twisted version of date night. I thought about the knife under my pillow, but I was too scared to grab it. I knew if I pulled it, I'd have to use it, and I wasn't ready for that. Eventually, he left. He kissed me on the forehead before walking out like we were still a couple. The second the door shut, I called 911 and told them I thought he was still in the building so they'd take it seriously. The police came, but of course, by then he was gone. I filed a report and got a restraining order, but it didn't feel like enough. He had been in my apartment. He had touched me while I slept. If I hadn't woken up when I did, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I moved out 2 weeks later and changed everything, my number, my locks, even my gym schedule. But I still sleep with the lights on, because every time I close my eyes, I see that shape at the foot of my bed. And I know if I hadn't opened them when I did, I might not be here telling you this story.